These stories were taken from Reddit, and are 100% true. If this frightens you, then I suggest you leave the video now and find something more amusing. If this interests you, sit back, relax, and enjoy. The road trip. When I was younger, each summer and almost every new year, my family would pack the car and go on a road trip to visit family in Mexico. We never had any problems until one particular trip when I was 8. Like every road trip before, we left our home in North Texas around 6 PM in order to reach our destination the next morning. So around 2 AM we crossed into Mexico, and that's when things got weird. When you're on the only stretch of freeway in the middle of the desert, you don't tend to freak out about having the same car behind you for miles. It was practically pitch black outside our car windows, the only visible shapes being the dotted stars and the eerie silhouettes of the cacti. We'd been in Mexico for about an hour and still had a few more to drive, and I remember sleeping but still being semi-conscious of what was around me because I didn't have the skill to really fall asleep in a car. So when my mother suddenly spoke my dad's name, I heard her. "Miguel, that car behind us, it's been behind us since we left Laredo." My dad peeked at the car and shrugged off my mother's tension. "A lot of cars use this road. He's probably going to Reynosa or another city." And he left it at that. Despite his sureness, my mum kept a wary eye on the car behind us. By this time, my siblings and I were hyper aware of the car and entertained ourselves with watching the car through the gaps in the luggage that blocked the rear window. We got tired pretty quick. "He's getting closer," my mother noted, and we turned to watch as the car inched closer and closer to ours. "He's too close, Miguel." And she was right. By this time, the car was practically pressed against the rear of our car, and on a lonely stretch of highway in the middle of nowhere with another few hours until daylight, it was downright scary. We couldn't do much. My dad didn't slow down, didn't stop, and he didn't speed away either. He just drove, and the car followed. The next 30 minutes were the most tense we had ever experienced. The car would ease off sometimes, only to press its blinding headlights against our rear once more, like he knew he was freaking us out and enjoying it. It was during one of the periods that the car had pulled away that my mum spotted a police car up ahead, parked on the side of the road, and she didn't miss a beat. "Pull over! Right in front of the police! Pull over right now, Miguel!" And he did, and the car kept driving. I wonder how confused the policeman must have been as he watched my dad park our car right in front of him. The policeman came over and asked what was wrong, and my mother urgently told him everything. The car, the way it followed us and taunted us. The policeman took a claim seriously and told us of how people were victimised and had their cars stolen on these empty highways by thugs and criminals. And then he offered to drive behind us for a while to make us feel safe. We drove off with the police cruiser behind us, relieved, until about 10 minutes later when we saw something that confirmed the policeman's words and my mother's worst fears. 10 minutes later, we saw the car pulled over on the side of the road, waiting. Saved by my neighbour. This happened a while ago, when I had moved into my own place for the first time. My parents had lent me money for a place, so I decided to move into a duplex type house, by myself. Anyway, after about a month of living there, I had gotten settled in and became quite friendly with my neighbours. One morning, I went to the mailbox to get bills and stuff, and I noticed that someone had broken it open. The metal lock on the back looked like it was shimmied off or something like that. I looked inside and mail was there, but it was all opened and put back in their ripped envelopes. At the time I didn't think much of it, and I was just pissed off. Jump forward a few days, and it's early in the morning. I had got up and was about to go to work. I opened my door to walk to my car, and I realised I had forgotten my tablet. I walked back inside, leaving my front door wide open. I walked back to the front door to see a man in a hoodie standing outside my door. I dropped all my stuff and let out a little squealing sound. I was more surprised than scared. He was outside my door at this point. All I could think to say was, "Hi." He didn't say anything. I picked up my stuff and walked towards the door to speak to him when I saw he was holding a backflip knife in his hand. I screamed as loud as I could and ran into my house, not looking back. I ran to the bathroom directly down the main hall of the house and locked myself in. It was a sliding door. I curled up on the floor and listened. I could hear him walking down my hallway. I just continued to scream as loud as I could. Here is the great thing about living in a duplex. My neighbours were a married couple in their early 60s, who at the time was sitting down for breakfast. I didn't know at the time, but the husband was an ex-police officer. I'll switch over to what happened through the eyes of my neighbour, from what I heard and what they tell me. I'll call the ex-cop Bill. They're eating breakfast when they faintly heard me scream the first time when I saw him at the door. When I started screaming at the top of my lungs, Bill obviously thought something was wrong. He stuffed his gun under his belt just in case. You can see the bathroom from my front door, and remember that the front door is wide open. Bill arrived at my front door to see the guy with the knife in his hand and his face pressed up against the bathroom door. Bill draws his gun and screams, "I don't know who the fuck you are, but drop the fucking knife." I hear this through the door, and I immediately feel a sense of relief, but also of adrenaline. Now this is where I say that I tell you that until you've heard gunshots in a confined space, you do not realise how loud they are. Apparently the guy didn't take the hint from Bill and ran at him with the knife. 3 deafening shots rang out. "Stay in there for the time being." I recognised the voice immediately as Bill's. I was never more relieved in my life. Long story short, Bill got 3 near-perfect shots on the guy's shoulder, enough to stop him in his tracks. The police came within minutes and took the guy away in an ambulance. Apparently, he'd been watching my house ever since I moved in and was a prior sex offender. So if it was not for my neighbours, I probably wouldn't be writing this right now. He lured me with Nutella coffee. I was just 18 then, attending Alora's wild birthday party at her house where the booze flowed freely. I had a policy of only drinking what I personally pour out of a bottle, or in an unopened can. I was normally so very careful. Towards the middle of the party, I was introduced to Eric, a friend of a friend's. After a few jokes, he said, "I could really use with some coffee right now." Then he proceeded to reach into his bag and pulled out a sachet of instant coffee and a bottle of Nutella. I was intrigued. He went into the kitchen and came back with a steaming mug. I swear to God, the smell of Nutella coffee was heavenly. So heavenly that I forgot to be careful. He watched me for a moment, then he insisted that I take it. It didn't take much convincing from him. I thanked him and I drank the coffee happily. 20 minutes later, I started feeling really sleepy. It was odd, since caffeine tends to get me hyper and gives me insomnia. I shouldn't have been sleepy. Eric was still chatting with me, but I was finding it harder and harder to focus. I made a move for the loo, and he stood to help me. I stumbled into Laura as we made our way out of the living room. Just at that moment, I had this gut instinct that I needed to throw myself on Laura. I was barely coherent at this point, but I focused all my attention on wrapping my arms around my friend. I can't even remember what happened for the rest of the night. In the morning, I found myself sleeping on Laura's bed while she was sleeping next to me. Apparently, I had clung onto her tightly even as Eric sought to untangle me. She sensed that something was up and decided not to let him take me away. After a while, Eric left the party. Several people then told her that he had a history of preying on girls and that they were glad that he was gone. Laura basically spent the rest of the party sitting on the couch with me hugging her and snoring away. And then she dragged me to bed with her. I'm really lucky to have a friend like her. And girls, never, ever drink anything at a party that you didn't pour yourself. Even delicious Nutella coffee. saved from being kidnapped abroad. When I was about 15, I went on a school trip to a neighbouring country. We were staying in quite a nice hotel, with a 7-Eleven less than half a mile walk away. My school was pretty loose, so the teachers allowed us to walk to the 7-Eleven whenever, just as long as we had another person with us. One night, at about 9 PM, my friend and I decided to go get some food. Side note, we are both girls. As we were walking there, a gold car, very recognisable, slowed down next to us. The windows rolled down to reveal 4 men, all about in their mid-20s, in army uniforms. They started catcalling and wolf whistling, and making us feel uncomfortable in general. We scoffed and kept walking, hoping they'd leave us alone. Eventually they drove off, but about 30 seconds later, they drove past us again, clearly having made a U-turn at the end of the road. This time, their calls were a lot more creepy, saying that we were their type, and it was going to be a fun night. My friend and I were only half a block from the 7-Eleven, so we ran inside, looking understandably panicked. We started browsing the store, but were too freaked out to buy anything. We were just about to leave when we noticed headlights passing the store windows. We turned to the front door and saw the gold car slowly doing circles around the car park. My friend and I really started freaking out, at which point the clerk in the store noticed. He asked us if we were okay, and we explained the situation to him. He said he'd handle it and went outside. We saw him lean into the gold car and making hand motions as if telling them to go away. The gold car drove off and we breathed a sigh of relief. We thanked the clerk and bought some food. Just as we were about to leave again, the clerk made a weird face at the door. "Hang on a second," he said. The clerk walked out of the store far enough to just see around the corner. He came back in very calmly and asked us to follow him to the back of the store. "Girls, I don't want to frighten you, but the car is parked around the corner and only the driver is in it." My friend and I asked what we should do, if we should call the police or something, but the clerk said that because the men were wearing military clothing, it was unlikely the police would be on our side. He said several girls in the city had gone missing in similar circumstances and nothing was ever done. The clerk told us his car was parked around the back of the shop, and if we were quick, we could get in and drive off without being seen by the gold car. Immediately I was skeptical about getting into a car with a stranger, but it was our only shot. We ran to the car and jumped in, and the clerk, thankfully, dropped us safely at the hotel. We told the teachers what had happened, and after that a rule was created, that if you were leaving the hotel, it was in groups of 3, with at least 1 boy. We went back a few times afterwards to thank the clerk, but only during the day.